You know, I honestly forgot about this record last week. When I did my 10 Years Later video on DJ Khaled's Victory, I didn't know that this album came out on the same day as that. Not for nothing, but Wikipedia's yearly list of album releases most of the time tends to suck, and it tends to forget a lot of big albums. I'm just saying. Anyway, welcome back to 10 Years Later, a series where I like to look back at albums from the 2010s that were either impactful to me, impactful to music in general, or just worth revisiting 10 years later, be it for good or bad reasons. And this was a record that interested me mostly just because this is an artist that I know is very polarizing in music today. So I wanted to look back and see if I could figure out where that all started from. So as you can tell by the title, the album that we will be talking about today is the 2010 Jason Derulo album. It's self-titled, so Jason Derulo. Jason Derulo, if you don't know, is a pop and R&B singer who was very popular in the 2010s, specifically from the early to mid 2010s, I would say, and this was his debut studio album. This is a guy who has had several big hits on the Billboard Hot 100, including but not limited to tracks like Riding Solo, In My Head, Trumpets, Talk Dirty, Wiggle, and Want to Want Me, just to name a few. And of course, there was Whatcha Say, his debut single, which actually reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. Jason Derulo has been very commercially successful throughout the 2010s and has had huge hits, but despite that, he has been an artist that I have seen a very polarizing response to. Obviously, with how his stuff is selling and the fact that he gets a lot of hits, something has to be going right, but I have seen a lot of critics that really do not like his stuff. Having only listened to a few tracks, I'm not really sure what it was that made a lot of critics not like him, so I wanted to check out this album to see if I could figure it out. Fortunately, it was just 9 tracks in 31 minutes, so it seemed like he wasn't really trying to overstay his welcome with this debut. And I can honestly say that as much disdain as Jason Derulo tends to get, I didn't really feel that when listening to this album. Not to say I absolutely loved it, but honestly, I didn't really hate what I was hearing here. If I could say one thing that I can imagine would rub people the wrong way about him, and this isn't so much related to just this album, but this is just his music in general, it's that his music relies a lot on sampling and interpolation to the point where some might think he lacks in original ideas. Hell, that chart-topping hit, Whatcha Say? Yeah, samples Imogen Heap's Hide and Seek, the last song I would expect Jason Derulo to sample. Still, as much as you could joke about that, the only other song on this record with a sample is The Sky's the Limit, which samples Irene Cara's Flashdance What a Feeling, but otherwise, oversampling doesn't read like too much of a big issue here. Maybe it will on his later albums, but with this record, I don't see it as much. Production-wise, most of what is here doesn't really stick out instrumentally. It feels like the songs were meant to showcase Jason's vocals and personality more so than the instrumentals. I think In My Head is a track that has a good instrumental. Jason sounds very natural over the pumping production, and the song stands as one of the rare moments on here where he's given a chance to shine without auto-tune. Speaking of which, in terms of his vocals, most of which are pretty good, I will say that I can see why some people do have problems with him vocally, because there are times where he is lathered in autotune. Ironically, preparing for this video and writing the script was the first time that I heard Whatcha Say in its entirety, and I gotta say, they definitely do give him his fair share of autotune on the song. Still, I think some of the melodies shine through and keep the song entertaining, making it a track that works in spite of itself. And speaking of tracks that work in spite of themselves, Riding Solo, which surprisingly Spotify only had the clean version of. The production is glossy, Jason's vocal inflections can get a bit grating on the song. It really shouldn't work, yet somehow it oddly hooks me in. Maybe I'm just giving into the machine and someone should stop me before I go haywire, but I feel like Jason has this weird thing about him where he'll make something that you'll swear up and down shouldn't work, but you'll still want to come back to it. And I think this track is an example of that. Same goes for the aforementioned The Sky's the Limit. I kept thinking I wouldn't like the song, but I like how it switches between energetic and emotional, and again, Jason has this weird knack for crafting very catchy melodies on the chorus. I was surprised, for as cynical as I should be with this thing, I actually liked quite a bit of it. My surprise with the album even continued on the track What If, a piano-driven song that might be the album's best showcase of Jason's vocal talents, at least in regards to tracks where he's not lathered in autotune. I like how catchy the chorus is, and while it might not be much you haven't heard before, I'm surprised that Jason can take some tried and true ideas and make them work here. Now, I'd be lying if I said this album was perfect, and and there are definitely some detours that I am not crazy about. Specifically, the album really slows to a halt around the halfway point, spoiling what could have been a pretty great pop and R&B record. Love Hangover is the perfect example. Some of the melodies on the chorus are nice, and I think the more electronic instrumental is one of the more colorful ones on the album. Shout out to that cowbell, by the way. But the problem stems from Jason just not sounding quite at home on this instrumental. This is one of those tracks where I feel like the instrumental doesn't match up to his voice, and it makes the song falter as a result. Encore is another track that falls a bit flat compared to some of the rest. Elements of the instrumental feel a bit overproduced, and I think the chorus on this one doesn't have the same stickiness that some of the other ones do. Perhaps it's the fact that the instrumental and Jason's vocals just don't really blend harmoniously, but I feel a disconnect with the song that stops it from working as well as it can. Fallen isn't particularly a low light thanks to Jason's vocals that remind me a bit of the 2000s era Neo, for example, but I think these somewhat more acoustic instrumentals also don't fit to Jason's voice, and they just don't flatter him very well. And the closing track, Blind, feels like a total throwaway. I kind of wonder how it even made the album. Even though it tries to be more mellow and goes for a more emotional feel, I don't think the song leans into that enough, and the chorus, the melodies, the vocals are probably some of the most boring ones on the album. Overall, I'm surprised to say that I actually enjoyed this album probably a bit more than I should. Is it amazing? Not at all. And I do kind of see why people aren't crazy about Jason Derulo. I wouldn't say he has the most distinct voice in the world, and I can't say his ear for production is the strongest, but again, he has this strange quality where for some reason he can make a song work in spite of itself. Maybe again it's just the uncanny ability to deliver great hooks, maybe he just knows the secrets to chart success, maybe it's dumb luck, but every once in a while he can take a tried and true formula and actually make it work. Does he do it consistently? Not really, and like I said, the second half of this record is a huge drag compared to the first, but honestly for a debut record, this thing isn't all that bad. All things considered, given some of the other albums that I've talked about on this segment, you can definitely do far worse. It's spotty and you might not get as much out of it as I did, but for what it's worth, it's not long, so maybe give it a shot if you're morbidly curious. My favorite tracks on here were Whatcha Say, Riding Solo, In My Head, The Sky's the Limit, and What If, and my least favorite tracks were Love Hangover, Encore, and Blind. Back in 2010, my younger self was hardly into pop music, but I did enjoy the occasional Jason Derulo song once or twice at the time, and I could have seen myself enjoying the album then. As of today, I can't say I love it, but I don't think it's too bad, and I guess I would have given it an okay rating if this was a full-blown review. Jason Derulo might not go down as a legend, but he will go down as an artist whose appeal I can slightly understand. But that's just my opinion on this album. What did you guys think about it? Was it all the craze to you back in 2010? Has it never been the craze to you? Have you been indifferent to Jason Derulo in general? Whatever your thoughts are, let me know down in the comments. Let's keep this civil and have some fun. If you guys want to hit like and subscribe, thank you so much. If not, it's no big deal. I totally understand. For what's next in this series, I think now that I've arranged my schedule a bit better in terms of what albums I want to look back on this year, I think the next one is Justin Bieber's My World 2.0, which maybe we'll have some fun with. I'm not totally sure yet. Stay tuned for it. But until then, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.